The prison gate opens as cameras rise and the man who framed me waits outside with a practiced smile. I stand just inside the threshold of the release area, fluorescent light washing the concrete into something almost clean, almost forgiving, and a corrections officer clips a temporary lanyard badge to my jacket like a courtesy meant to feel human. The badge is thin plastic, warm from his fingers, and it swings when I move, announcing me to a half-circle of lenses and murmurs. I know exactly where I am, the east release gate, the narrow strip of shadow where people step from institution to world, where the air smells like metal and damp paper. He stands 10 feet away, framed perfectly by the open sky suit, pressed hair in place, palms open in a gesture that reads as relief to anyone watching. "Easy," someone says behind a camera. "Hold there." I hold. My immediate goal is simple and precise: cross the line without giving them what they want. "You're free to go," this officer says, voice neutral, eyes already moving past me. The badge catches the light as I step forward, and the crowd tightens, phones, lifting a practiced choreography of sympathy and spectacle. He smiles wider when he sees the badge, as if it proves something about him. "We're just glad this is over," he says to no one, and everyone, a line meant for evening news. My throat stays still. 2 years teach you how to keep things still. The badge swings as I step forward, and I understand he believes this moment restores him. A reporter leans in. Any comment, I look at the gate instead, at the seam where it meets the ground at the place where rules pretend to end. "She needs time," he says quickly, protective, benevolent. A guard shifts his weight. The gate hums closed behind me with a sound that is softer than it should be. People clap, then stop when the sound doesn't catch. He reaches out, not touching, careful of optics. "We'll get through this," he says, voice low meant for my ear, but angled just enough for a microphone to taste it. The badge knocks once against my ribs, a small, dull knock that reminds me how access works. I don't look at him. I step into the light and feel the air change, feel the crowd lean forward as one body, and I let them see exactly what he expects to see. Nothing. I walk past him with the badge still visible, because he doesn't yet know what that permission will cost. I'm Emily Carter, 41, a paralegal from Columbus, Ohio. I remembered the week before everything broke as orderly, almost boring, the kind of quiet that convinces you systems work if you don't disturb them. It was past tense even then, though I didn't know it. A memory already filing itself while I stood in the firm's administrative office with neutral walls and a hum that never quite stopped. My immediate goal, modest and professional, confirmed the guest logistics for a small donor reception my husband insisted on hosting. The folded guest list lay on the corner of the desk, creased into quarters like it had been handled too often. Names aligned in a tidy column that pretended fairness. "You'll want to keep it tight," Daniel said, adjusting his cuff, not looking at me. Tight how I asked, and he smiled without warmth. "Appropriate," he said, and the word landed heavier than it should have. I unfolded the list and refolded it a habit, when I needed control, noticing one name struck through with a thin line that didn't quite erase it. "This person confirmed," I said. "They did," he replied too fast. "They won't attend." "Why?" I asked, and he leaned back, chair whispering. "Because optics matter," he said, and the consequence was immediate. The door behind him stayed half closed when a partner walked by a practiced block. The office door never fully opens. I told myself it was nothing, that closed doors were normal in law-adjacent rooms, but the folded list felt heavier when I held it paper, remembering pressure. "I'll update the seating," I said. "No," he said. "Leave it." "That affects the count," I said. "I know," he replied, and the consequence was a glance from the assistant at the threshold, curiosity checked by silence. "Is there a problem?" she asked. "No," he said, for both of us. "We're aligned." Alignment sounded like consent. I watched him slide the list an inch toward himself, not taking it, just claiming the space around it. "You're overthinking," he said. "I handle the outside. I handle compliance," I said, and the words felt truer than marriage. "Not tonight," he said, smiling again. "Tonight we're hosts." The folded guest list became a prop in my hands, an object doing work without speaking names, deciding who belonged before anyone arrived. "Who crossed this out?" I asked, tapping the crease. "Does it matter?" he said. "Yes," I said, and the consequence was a soft laugh from him that cut me off at the knees. "You trust me," he said. "Not a question, a placement." "I do," I said, because that was the role, and the assistant shifted back door, easing toward closed. I noticed then how often conversations ended before they finished, how often I was thanked and dismissed in the same breath. I realized the list decides entry, while the room decides silence, and neither asks permission. Later in the hallway, the assistant caught up to me. "He wants fewer cameras," she said quietly. "Why?" I asked. "He said donors prefer privacy," she said, and the consequence was the sudden awareness of where eyes would not be. "Did anyone object?" I asked. "No," she said. They nodded. Nods can be louder than refusals. Back at my desk, I folded the guest list again, pressing the crease flat, thinking of thresholds and how access is shaped before doors are locked. I didn't confront him. I corrected nothing. I told myself it was prudence, that timing mattered, that this was a small accommodation in a long partnership. When the door stays half closed and the list stays folded, I learn where I'm not invited next. The back office sat at the end of a narrow hallway that smelled like toner and old carpet, a place designed for short conversations and longer consequences, and I went there late in the afternoon when the building softened into routine and people trusted clocks more than instincts. My immediate goal was verification, without a ripple to see whether the quiet I'd felt had a paper trail, and the sealed legal envelope waited in my bag like a promise I hadn't agreed to make. I closed the door behind me and set the envelope on the desk, its glue seam unbroken, the firm's logo stamped small and official in the corner, a prop meant to convey inevitability. "You're not supposed to be in here," a colleague said from the doorway, half smiling, half serious. "I know," I said, and slid my chair an inch closer to the screen. The consequence was immediate. She hesitated, then stayed curiosity pinning her feet. "5 minutes," she said. "That's all." The envelope stayed closed as I opened my email fingers. Steady breath, shallow, the hum of the building pressing in. When the forwarded message loaded, I didn't read the body first. I read the header the way you read weather before stepping outside. There it was, a routing line that listed an internal server path and a generic location tag back office, paired with a short ref code E7K9 that shouldn't have existed yet. The time of day stamp glowed at the edge of the screen, 4:12 p.m., quiet, precise, unforgiving. "That doesn't look right," my colleague said, leaning closer. "It isn't," I said, and the consequence was the tightening of her jaw, the look people get when they understand they're standing on a threshold. The envelope caught the light as I turned it paper, whispering against paper, reminding me that the firm preferred truth delivered unopened. I clicked into the routing history and saw the sender hop twice inside the building before landing where it wasn't supposed to be, the kind of movement that only happens when someone with authority clears the way. "Who sent it?" she asked. "It was sent to me," I said. "Then forwarded internally," she said, finishing the thought, eyes flicking to the door. "Before anything was official," I said, and felt the floor tilt, not with fear but with confirmation. The envelope's seal remained intact, a performance of propriety, while the header did the real work. "You can't save that," she said. "I know," I replied, and took a photo of the screen with my phone anyway, careful to catch the ref code and the location tag without the rest. The consequence arrived as footsteps in the hall, voices passing, a laugh, then nothing. "You didn't hear this from me," she said. I didn't hear anything I said, and slid the envelope back into my bag. The header shows the message moved before permission existed, and I feel the floor give under a story built on timing. When I left the office, the hallway seemed longer, every door, a decision, every hinge, a reminder that access is an act. Daniel called as I reached the stairwell. "Where are you?" he asked, voice easy, practiced. "At work," I said. "Late?" he asked. "A bit," I said, and the consequence was a pause long enough to register. "Don't worry about the reception," he said. "I've handled it." I know, I said, and heard the envelope rustle in my bag as if it disagreed. "You sound tired," he said. "I am," I replied, because truth is sometimes safer when it's small. "Come home," he said. "We'll eat," and the words landed like a plan already executed. I took the stairs 2 at a time, the building emptying around me, and outside, the light had shifted the day-closing ranks. At my desk, I wrote the ref code on a sticky note and stuck it under my keyboard. Not to remember it, but to see if it would be taken a test as old as fear. When I checked later, it was gone. The consequence was a calm I didn't expect, the kind that arrives when the game declares itself. The envelope stayed sealed all evening, a symbol of restraint that let the header speak alone, and when I finally shut down my computer, the office reflected me back in the dark glass, smaller, steadier, less surprised. I understood then that I wouldn't confront him with what I had. I would let the system feel it first, let the paper cut do its quiet work before the room learned to bleed. I leave the envelope sealed because the header already crossed the door, and that makes the lie measurable. The reception unfolded in a downtown hotel ballroom that smelled faintly of citrus cleaner and money, a public space designed to flatter donors and erase friction. And I arrived early because arriving early lets you see how the room plans to behave. My immediate goal was survival through visibility, not confrontation to be present without becoming the story. The wireless microphone lay on the lectern, matte black, a thin red ring glowing to say it was live, even when no one spoke, and the sightlines were clean enough to make everyone careful. I took a seat near the aisle, close enough to exits, to feel in control, far enough from the front to be ignored. Daniel moved like a host, trained to fill silence, greeting people by first names, touching elbows, nodding to staff. "We'll keep it short," he told the room, smiling. "Privacy matters." The consequence was immediate. Phones dipped, then rose again as people recalibrated what privacy meant here. A venue manager stood near the back with a tablet Tara and Gwen clipboard tucked under one arm, eyes scanning counts. "Sound check?" someone asked. "Liv," Tara said, tapping the tablet. The microphone hissed softly, a small animal waking up. I watched the screen behind the lectern cycle through sponsor logos and noticed how the lighting cut the room into bands, bright center dim edges, a cut line where faces became silhouettes. Daniel stepped up, took the microphone without testing it, and began a practiced gratitude that landed like rain expected, harmless boring. "We believe in transparency," he said, and the word echoed just enough to sound important. I kept my hands folded, breathing shallow, counting the ways attention moved. When the slideshow advanced, it paused on a black frame longer than it should have, a glitch no one claimed. "Sorry," Daniel said lightly. "Technical." The consequence arrived as a whisper behind me. "That's odd," a donor murmured. "It happens," another replied, relief quick. Tara's eyes flicked to the back wall where a small monitor glowed, the venue feed looping. The next slide came up, not a logo, but a still image from a camera I recognized only because I'd learned to recognize corners, a hallway angle generic signage, a strip of carpet. In the corner, a timestamp read 4:12 p.m., and beneath it a location tag, venue entrance, paired with a seat identifier A12 that belonged to the front row. The room leaned forward before anyone spoke. "Is this part of the presentation?" Someone laughed, then stopped. Daniel froze for a fraction of a second too long, a host's smile turning brittle. "That's not," he began, and the microphone carried the hitch. "We'll just," Tara moved efficient, tapping her tablet. "Hold," she said to the AV tech voice, calm. The still sharpened, the contrast adjusted automatically, and the image resolved into Daniel himself, half-turned, speaking to someone just out of frame. The date scrubbed the time undeniable. Phones rose. "Is that... it looks like..." The whisper wave rolled, laughter dying, replaced by the hush that means people are recording. Daniel cleared his throat. "That's a security still," he said. Out of context. "Context is time," someone said near the aisle, cruelly specific without raising their voice. 4:12. The microphone picked it up anyway. Daniel smiled wider. "Let's stay focused," he said. "We're here for the cause." Which cause, a woman asked, and the consequence was a ripple of discomfort that reached the back wall. I stayed still, letting the room work, letting the image do what images do when they're allowed to sit. Tara leaned toward the tech. "Keep it," she said quietly, logging something on her clipboard. The still didn't accuse. It waited. When the room sees him at the entrance at 4:12, the microphone makes silence expensive. Daniel tried to laugh it off. "Security feeds catch everyone," he said. "That's why they exist. Then why is the date missing?" a man asked, pointing. "Why scrub it?" The microphone hummed as if listening. Daniel's eyes found me for the first time that night, a flicker of calculation crossing his face. "Emily," he said, using my name like a shield. "You know how these systems work." The consequence was immediate. Heads turned, the room reoriented around me, and I felt the old reflex to apologize rise and die. "They work by time," I said evenly, not touching the microphone, letting my voice carry the distance. "By logs." A few nods. "Let's move on," Daniel said, and Tara shook her head once, almost imperceptibly. "We can't," she said. "It's live." The still stayed up another beat, long enough to burn. Then the slideshow advanced, the sponsors returning like a relief. Applause stuttered, then resumed thinner. Daniel finished quickly, thanked everyone, and stepped down without looking at me. People stood, chairs scraping, conversations breaking into shards. "We should talk," he said when he reached me, low, urgent. "Not here," I replied. "Exactly," he said, and the words sounded like a plea. The consequence came from the back. Tara approached with her clipboard. "I've logged the feed anomaly," she said. "Professional neutral. If you need a copy, request it." Daniel nodded too fast. "Thank you," he said. "Please don't circulate." "We don't," Tara said. "The system does." She moved on. As the room emptied, I noticed how exits functioned, who lingered near doors, who avoided eye contact. A donor brushed past me. "You were right," she said softly, a statement without a question. "About what I asked." "Time," she said, and left. Daniel caught my arm near the threshold, careful of cameras. "You embarrassed me," he said through a smile. "You embarrassed yourself," I said, and the consequence was the tightening of his grip before he remembered himself. "This isn't over," he said. "It rarely is," I replied. The microphone lay unattended on the lectern red ring, still glowing, a witness no one could turn off. As the crowd files out and the mic stays live, I understand this was only the first door. The administrative annex smelled like disinfectant and old coffee, a place where outcomes were logged without witnesses, and I went there the morning after the reception because daylight makes lies look thinner. My immediate goal was coherence, make the timeline stop wobbling while the clipboard with the incident log rested on the counter like a truce offered by paper. The clerk on duty didn't recognize me, which helped. Anonymity is a kind of access. "I need to verify an intake," I said, voice level. "Which unit?" she asked, already reaching for the clipboard. "Processing," I replied, and she slid it toward me without looking up, a small mercy disguised as routine. The log was thick pages, softened by hand signatures stacked like sediment, and when I found my name, the pen marks looked confident, decisive, nothing like my own. "That's your signature?" the clerk asked, glancing at the line. "It isn't," I said, and the consequence was immediate. Her eyebrows lifted, then settled into a shape that meant policy. "We'd need proof," she said. "I know," I replied, and turned the clipboard so she could see the badge color, noted in the margin blue, assigned to staff authorized after hours. "I never had blue," I said. "I had green." She hesitated, then flipped back a page. "Green is standard," she said. "Blue is restricted." The room went quiet in the way rooms do when a rule shows its teeth. "Who logged this?" I asked. She scanned the initials. "Supervisor," she said, and the word carried weight. "Which one?" I asked. She shook her head. "I can't disclose," she said, and the consequence was the soft click of a drawer closing, a boundary drawn. I took a photo of the page, careful to catch the badge color and the initials without the rest, and the clipboard felt heavier when I set it down, as if it resented being used. "This will create a review," she said. "It should," I replied. "It might take time," she added, a warning dressed as help. "Time is what I'm checking," I said, and the phrase sounded truer than I intended. When I stepped back into the hall, my phone buzzed. Daniel's name lit the screen like a dare. "We need to talk," he said when I answered, skipping pleasantries. "About last night," I asked. "About the damage," he said. "You don't understand how this works." I do, I replied. I log consequences. He laughed once, sharp. You logged a problem, he said. I'll clean it. You already did, I said, and the consequence was silence long enough to hear his breath. You're upset, he said finally. We can fix this quietly. Quietly fixes you, I said. It buries me. He lowered his voice. You signed, he said. The log doesn't lie. The log contradicts itself, I replied, and ended the call before he could reframe it. By noon, the annex buzzed with controlled motion. A supervisor passed me without seeing me, eyes forward, jaw set. I waited until the hall cleared, then asked the clerk, Can I see the intake camera index? She hesitated. That requires authorization, she said. Who authorizes? I asked. Security, she said, pointing down the hall. And logs, I said, tapping the clipboard lightly, and the consequence was a small nod, not permission, but acknowledgement. She handed me a slip with a generic location processing and a reference to a camera cluster. That's all I can do, she said. It's enough, I replied. Outside the light was harsh, the kind that flattens faces. I sat in my car and stared at the photo on my phone, the blue badge notation like a bruise you can't stop pressing. The logic fracture wasn't just that someone signed for me, it was that multiple systems agreed to pretend I did. I thought about the folded guest list, the half-closed doors, the header that moved before permission existed. Patterns are just habits with alibis. When the blue badge appears beside my name, the story breaks its own spine. Daniel texted a minute later. We should meet. I typed, not today, then deleted it and wrote, send me the policy. He responded almost instantly. Which one? The consequence was a smile I didn't feel. The one that allows blue badges at intake, I typed. He didn't reply. I drove to the firm parked in Visitor because the old spots felt unsafe and took the stairs 2 at a time. In the hallway outside Daniel's office, the assistant looked up, eyes wide. He's in a meeting, she whispered. I won't interrupt, I said, and placed the clipboard photo on her desk, angled, so she couldn't avoid seeing it. Do you know what this means? I asked softly. She swallowed. It means a review, she said. It means a timeline, I said. It means someone decided when I stopped being a person. She nodded once. I'll log it, she said, fingers already moving. The door to Daniel's office stayed closed. The door never fully opens. Later that afternoon, Marcus Hale called. We hadn't spoken in years, not since he left the firm for work that didn't require smiles. I heard about the reception, he said. People talk. People record, I replied. I have something I added. I suspected, he said. Send it. I sent the photo and the ref to the camera cluster. He was quiet for a beat. This creates leverage, he said. It also creates enemies. I already have those, I said. Then we'll be precise, he said, and the word felt like oxygen. Timing matters, he added. It always does, I replied. That evening, Daniel came home late, keys clinking like punctuation. You went to the annex, he said, not asking. I logged a question. I replied. You logged an accusation, he said. No, I said. I logged a contradiction. He poured a drink, hands steady. You're making this worse, he said. For whom, I asked. He set the glass down too hard. You don't understand the scope, he said. I understand consent, I replied. And when it's forged. He stared at me, the room narrowing. You'll regret this, he said. I already did, I replied, and went to bed without waiting for his answer. The clipboard image glowed on my phone in the dark blue badge and initials doing their quiet work, and I slept the way you sleep when a system finally admits it can be hurt. As the log contradicts itself, and he calls it damage control, I know the fracture will travel. The conference room Marcus chose was deliberately unremarkable, a rented space with neutral art and chairs that didn't invite comfort. And we met there in the late afternoon when offices empty and decisions harden. My immediate goal was pressure, without exposure to let contradiction speak before anyone could interrupt it, and the projector remote sat in my palm like a small animal that would bite if handled poorly. Marcus stood near the screen jacket off sleeves, rolled a posture that suggested work rather than theater. We play it once, he said. No commentary. Who's coming? I asked. 2 people who can't pretend they didn't hear it, he said, and 1 who will. The room hummed as the projector warmed light, cutting a clean rectangle on the wall, the edges sharp enough to feel surgical. The motif returned to me uninvited, the chain rattles before release, and I thought about how many rooms depend on the sound of something almost giving way. They arrived without ceremony. A compliance officer from the firm's oversight committee took a seat near the door, notebook open. A facilities manager hovered by the light switch, unsure where to stand. Daniel came last, smiling as if we'd agreed to this. "What's this?" he asked, eyes flicking to the screen. "A clarification," Marcus said, neutral. "We're short on time." "I'm always short on time," Daniel replied, and sat anyway, crossing his legs, confident. I pressed the projector remote, feeling the click through my thumb, and the screen filled with a simple audio interface. A waveform paused at the start. The file name was generic, an alphanumeric string with a short ref code, R2A9 beneath it, and a location tag, conference room, sat in small type like a footnote. "What am I listening to?" Daniel asked. "A memory," Marcus said. "Recorded." "By whom?" Daniel said. "That's not relevant," Marcus replied. The facilities manager shifted. "Is this authorized?" he asked. "It's evidence," Marcus said, and the word changed the temperature of the room. I pressed play. The audio came in clean, a little room, echo the sound of papers moving, a chair scraping. Then Daniel's voice, unmistakable, measured. "We can't let this reach intake," he said in the recording, and the consequence arrived as his real-world body stilled, eyes narrowing. Another voice answered, softer, nervous. "She'll notice. She signs what we give her," Daniel said on the recording. "Timing matters." A pause. "Routed internally. First," he continued, "I'll clear it." The oversight officer's pen stopped moving. The facilities manager looked at the door as if considering escape. "This is edited," Daniel said aloud, too quickly. "You can hear the room tone," Marcus replied. "You can hear the sequence." The waveform continued, the timestamp in the corner advancing in steady increments, no date, just minutes and seconds enough to show continuity without inviting argument. "We're protecting the firm," Daniel's recorded voice said. "We're protecting you," the other voice replied, and the word "you" hung there, exposing motive like a nerve. I watched Daniel's hands, how they tightened on the armrest, how he leaned forward when the recording hit the line he thought he'd buried. "Stop this," he said. "This is inappropriate." "We'll stop when it stops," Marcus replied, nodding toward the screen. The facilities manager cleared his throat. "I recognize this room," he said quietly. "It's ours." "It's tagged," Marcus said. "The system did that." The oversight officer looked up at Daniel. "You authorized internal routing before intake?" she asked. Daniel smiled, reflexive. "We needed to stabilize the situation," he said. "Stabilize against whom?" she asked. "Against chaos," he said, and the words sounded hollow now. When his voice admits the reroute and the waveform refuses to break, the room learns where the chain holds. The recording ended with the soft click of a door latch, the same sound I'd learned to hear as permission denied. Silence followed, expensive and unshared. Marcus didn't fill it. He let the projector's fan speak, let the oversight officer close her notebook with care. "We'll need a copy," she said. "You'll get it," Marcus replied. "Logged." Daniel stood abruptly. "You're ambushing me," he said, anger finally shedding its manners. "You're contextualizing," Marcus said. "There's a difference." Daniel turned to me, then eyes sharp. "You recorded me," he said. "I preserved myself," I replied, and the consequence was a laugh from him that died halfway through. "You're making a mistake," he said. "You're making a spectacle." "Not yet," Marcus said, almost kindly. "This is containment." Daniel pointed at the facilities manager. "You're violating policy," he said. "Read it," the manager replied, surprising himself. "Read the clause out loud." The oversight officer slid a card across the table. "We'll follow up," she said to Daniel. "Soon," he scoffed. "On what basis?" "On continuity," she said, tapping the ref code on the screen, "and authority." After they left the room, felt larger, emptier. Marcus shut down the projector, the light collapsing back into the wall. "That's the echo," he said quietly. "They can't unhear it." I nodded, the remote warm in my hand, the click still vibrating in my thumb. "What happens now?" I asked. "Pressure," he said, "and mistakes." My phone buzzed. A text from Daniel. "You crossed a line." I typed nothing. Outside the hallway, lights flickered once, then steadied, and I thought about the sound of chains and how release always threatens before it arrives. I pocket the remote as his words replay because once the chain rattles, every door listens. The service corridor behind the venue was narrow and loud in the wrong ways, fans rattling overhead, and a cart squealing somewhere out of sight, and I waited there because thresholds behave differently when you stand on the side meant for staff. My immediate goal was to keep pressure steady without triggering flight, to let the system choose between honesty and habit, and the venue keycard lay flat against my palm, its plastic edge warm from being handled too much. Marcus had warned me not to push. Pressure, he said, travels faster when it thinks it's voluntary. Tara Nguyen stepped out of a door marked "Authorized Only" and closed it with her foot clipboard tucked under her arm. "You shouldn't be here," she said not unkindly. "I know," I replied. "I won't stay." She studied the keycard, then my face. "You have access?" she asked. "Borrowed," I said. "Logged," she corrected, tapping the clipboard. The consequence was immediate. The door behind her clicked. Not open, not closed. Waiting. A woman I didn't recognize hovered near the vending machine's phone, clutched to her chest like a shield. "That's her," Tara said quietly. "She asked for you." The woman took a step forward, then stopped. "I don't want trouble," she said. "I want accuracy," I replied, keeping my voice low. "Those are different," she said, and the sentence carried weight. We moved a few feet down the corridor out of the camera's direct line, though the red indicator still glowed, recording whether we liked it or not. "I was seated in A12, the woman said, words rehearsed but trembling. "Front row," she swallowed. I saw him come in through the side entrance before the program started. When Tara asked, before the lights dimmed, the woman said, "He spoke to security. He asked about a list." The keycard felt heavier. "Which list?" I asked. "The guest list," she said. Folded. He tapped it like this. She mimed a finger on paper, a gesture that made my stomach tighten. "Did anyone else see?" Tara asked. "The usher," the woman said. "And the camera over the door." "Which door?" Tara asked. "The service entrance," the woman said, pointing. "The one with the green exit sign." Marcus appeared at the end of the corridor unannounced, as if summoned by the mention of cameras. "I'll need a statement," he said gently, offering a pen and a small pad. "I can't," the woman said, panic flaring. "I work with him," she added, and the consequence was a ripple through the space. "Fear is a loud currency." "You can," Marcus said. "It doesn't name motive. It names location." "And time," Tara said. "Relative time." Marcus corrected eyes on me, reminding me of the rules we were playing by. The woman nodded, breath shallow, and wrote with quick slanted strokes, anchoring her memory to place and seat to the green sign and the folded paper. When she finished, Marcus photographed the page, careful to catch the seat identifier and the corridor location, and handed it back. "You keep the original," he said. "I keep the record." The woman exhaled, shoulders sagging. "Will this end it?" she asked. "It escalates it," Marcus replied honestly. The keycard beeped softly when Tara tested it against the reader, a polite refusal. "Your access is limited," she said, meeting my eyes. "I know," I replied. "That's the point." She logged the interaction pen, scratching, and the door behind her opened an inch, then stopped. "The door never fully opens." Daniel's voice carried down the corridor before he appeared. "This is inappropriate," he said. "Suit immaculate, even back here." "You're intimidating witnesses." "You're naming them," Marcus said calmly. "We aren't." Daniel's gaze flicked to the woman. "You misunderstand what you saw," he said, tone practiced. "Memory is unreliable. Location isn't," Marcus replied. "Neither is a seat number." Daniel laughed sharp. "Read the clause out loud," he said to Tara, a reflex he'd used on others. "The one about staff access." Tara didn't move. "Which clause?" she asked. "The one you're violating?" he snapped. "Your badge is blue," Marcus said evenly. Mine is cleared. Don't pretend. The line landed with a thud that even the fans couldn't drown out. Daniel stepped closer to me, careful to block the camera's view with his body. "You're forcing this," he said through his teeth. "I'm letting it breathe," I replied. "Stop," he said. "Not yet," Marcus said, and the consequence was a hush as someone turned a cart corner and paused, listening. When the witness names the entrance and the keycard refuses me, the hallway chooses truth over habit. Daniel's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, then pocketed it without reading. "We're done," he said. "For today," Marcus agreed. "Authority has been notified," he added lightly as if discussing weather. Daniel's eyes snapped back. "Authority," he said. "On standby," Marcus replied. "Routine." The woman slipped away. Relief and fear braided tight. Tara closed the door fully this time, the click decisive. "I'll preserve the footage," she said. "Request it properly." "We will," Marcus replied. The corridor seemed to exhale. "He'll counter," I said. "He always does." "Good," Marcus replied. "Counters leave marks." As we walked toward the exit, Daniel fell in step beside me. "You think you've won?" he said softly. "I think you've documented," I replied. "There's a difference." He smiled without humor. "People forget," he said. "Systems don't," I replied. He stopped walking. "This is your last chance," he said. "To be reasonable." I turned keycard cool now and met his eyes. "Reasonable is relative," I said. "Permission isn't." Outside, the air was sharp, the city loud with ordinary life. My phone buzzed again, Marcus forwarding a short note from an oversight office neutral language, the phrase on standby, doing its quiet work. I watched the venue doors open and close, guests flowing through, unaware of the pressure moving behind walls. The keycard slid back into my pocket, its edge catching on fabric, a reminder of where access ends. As authority waits, and he tightens his smile, I understand the trap closes by inches, not leaps. The office Marcus borrowed for the afternoon was smaller than the conference room, a place that encouraged confession by denying comfort, and I arrived with my immediate goal recalibrated from pressure to timing. The audio recorder sat on the table between us, palm-sized brushed metal catching the light, its red indicator unlit, but watchful an object that promised permanence without speaking. Outside the glass wall, the city moved as usual, a reminder that reversals rarely announce themselves. "He's maneuvering," Marcus said, closing the door. "We want him to." I nodded, thinking about the corridor witness and the way fear sharpens memory. The recorder felt heavier when I picked it up, not because it weighed more, but because I understood what it could do if left idle. Marcus slid his phone across the table. "This came through a back channel," he said. On the screen was a screenshot of an internal memo, the kind that pretends to be procedural while choosing sides. The header was plain, the body spare, and the details did the work a ref code in the corner, M4L2, a generic location tag administration, and a directive about routing and review that read like a neutral guideline until you saw the sentence that mattered. Any intake anomalies are to be stabilized internally prior to external logging. It said the phrase stabilized, doing a lot of labor. "By whose authority?" I asked. "By his," Marcus replied, "and two others." The consequence arrived as a clarity I hadn't expected. The memo didn't just implicate Daniel, it widened the circle. "This changes posture," Marcus said. "It changes scope," I replied. He smiled thinly. "That's the reversal. We didn't celebrate. We prepared." Marcus asked me to read the memo aloud into the recorder, not for theatrics, but for fidelity to capture cadence and emphasis the way machines do. I pressed the red button, felt the soft click through my finger, and began. My voice sounded steadier than I felt. Internal memo, I read, Ref M4L2 administration. I read the directive slowly, letting each word land, stopping only when my throat tightened. When I finished, Marcus nodded. Again he said, "Once more." I did the recorder, blinking its small, patient eye, the room absorbing the sound. "That's enough," he said, and I stopped the recording. The consequence was immediate. The air felt denser, as if a door had closed somewhere else. Daniel called while we were still sitting there. I watched the phone vibrate itself closer to the recorder. "Answer," Marcus said. On speaker, I added and set the device between us. Not recording yet, just listening. You're spreading misinformation, Daniel said without greeting. You don't understand internal controls. I understand directives, I replied. I have one in front of me, he paused. Which one, he asked, careful. The one about stabilizing anomalies, I said. The silence stretched. That's standard, he said finally. Standard isn't neutral, Marcus said, stepping in. It's chosen. Daniel laughed brittle. You're escalating, he said. We're clarifying, Marcus replied. There's a difference. You think a screenshot proves intent, Daniel said. It proves coordination, I replied. It proves timing. Timing is contextual, he said. Context is location, Marcus replied. Administration. Another pause. You can't use that, Daniel said. Why, I asked. Because it's internal, he said. So was the routing, I replied and ended the call. We listened to the silence afterward, the way it pressed back. He'll try to bury this, Marcus said. He can't, I replied. It's already copied. He'll try anyway, Marcus said. That's good, I replied. Attempts leave trails. I slid the recorder into my bag and took a photo of the memo screenshot with my phone, careful to include the ref code and the location tag without anything that could be contested as extraneous. The object did its quiet work. The recorder didn't accuse, it waited. Later that evening, I met Tara at a coffee shop that smelled like burnt beans and lemon neutral ground, where people pretended not to listen. She slid into the chair opposite me and didn't order. They're asking for footage, she said, from administration. Will you give it? I asked. Proper request, she said. Logged. I nodded. They're also asking who authorized the routing, she added. Good, I said. What did you say I said, policy? She replied. Which policy? I asked. She smiled faintly. The one they keep rewriting. The consequence was a warmth I didn't trust. Be careful, I said. I am, she replied. I log everything. The recorder stayed in my bag, a weight against my hip. The reversal showed itself in small ways first. An assistant forwarded me an email meant for someone else asking about contingency statements. A supervisor asked Marcus for clarification hypothetically. Daniel stopped calling and started emailing, language growing formal-hedged. He's moving to paper, Marcus said when I showed him the messages. He's late, I replied. Paper keeps memory. So do recordings, Marcus said, glancing at my bag. And screenshots, I added. That night, Daniel came home and didn't touch anything as if contact itself were evidence. You're blowing this up, he said, standing in the doorway. It's already expanded, I replied. I'm naming it. You're risking collateral, he said. I'm reducing it, I replied. He shook his head. You don't see the bigger picture, he said. I do, I replied. It has a ref code. His jaw tightened. You think a memo changes everything, he asked. It changes who's afraid, I replied. When the memo names stabilization and the recorder keeps my voice, the balance flips without noise. He stared at me, then laughed a sound without humor. You always liked procedures, he said. They like you back, I replied. The next morning, Marcus forwarded a notice from an oversight office acknowledging receipt of supplemental material. The language was careful, neutral, but the shift was unmistakable. This accelerates, Marcus wrote. I felt it too, the way a trap tightens not with a snap, but with a measured turn. I checked the recorder's battery and set it on the table, the red light off the device patient. Outside, the city continued its ordinary business, unaware of the line that had been crossed in an unremarkable office. I closed my bag and stood my immediate goal set again, not to prove, but to place what I had where it could not be moved. I leave the recorder powered and ready, because once the memo circulates, silence stops being an option. The decision cornered me on an ordinary weekday afternoon, the kind that disguises pressure as routine, and I met it in Marcus's office because neutrality makes choices sharper. My immediate goal was placement. Put the last contradiction where it couldn't be reframed, and the time-stamped CCTV still lay between us on the desk, glossy paper curling at the corners as if it wanted to escape the truth it carried. The image showed a corridor I knew too well, The service entrance with the green exit sign, a sliver of the door latch visible at the edge, and a time of day stamp printed cleanly in the corner, 4:09 p.m. 3 minutes earlier than the header that started everything. 3 minutes that couldn't be smoothed away. "This is the hinge," Marcus said, tapping the still with his knuckle. "If we place it wrong, it bends. If we place it right," I said, "it breaks." He nodded and slid a second printout across the desk. The email header from weeks ago, the ref code E7K9 circled in red, the routing path underlined. 412, he said. 49, I replied, pointing back to the still. Same corridor, he added. Different story, I said. The clock on the wall ticked with theatrical patience, and I forced myself to breathe slowly to keep my voice level. The image was clear enough to make denial expensive. Daniel stood at the service entrance, shoulder angled toward a security guard, folded guest list visible under his arm, the paper crease unmistakable even in black and white. The timestamp didn't need a date. It needed proximity. "We don't announce this," Marcus said. "We submit." Where I asked, "Oversight," he replied, "and operations. Not yet public," I said. "Not yet," he agreed. "But we cede the certainty." Daniel tried to move first. His email arrived 10 minutes later, subject line neutral to the point of insult clarification. He wrote about context and coincidence, about camera drift and system lag, about how stills lie when stripped of metadata. "He's aiming at plausibility," Marcus said, scanning. "He's late," I replied. I forwarded the message to Marcus with the still attached, then to Tara with a single line. "Can you confirm corridor camera sync?" She replied within minutes. Sync confirmed. No drift. The consequence arrived as a small, steady calm. The system had chosen a side without raising its voice. We walked the packet down to operations together, not as a confrontation, but as a delivery. The office was bright, all glass, and white surfaces, faces readable in the way power prefers when it's being observed. "We're submitting supplemental material," Marcus said to the intake officer, placing the still on the counter with care. "Ref E7K9, he added. "And this," he said, sliding the image forward, "shows the same corridor 3 minutes earlier." The officer examined the stamp. 4:09, she read. "And the routing is 412, I said. "Which requires him to be in 2 places in 3 minutes, Marcus added. "Unless the officer said trailing off. Unless access was prearranged." I finished. The officer nodded once professional and logged the receipt, writing the location service entrance and the ref codes in a tidy hand. "We'll verify," she said. "Please do," Marcus replied. "We already have." Tara said from the doorway clipboard tucked under her arm, her presence a quiet reinforcement. The officer looked up. "You're confirming?" she asked. "I'm logging," Tara replied. "The system confirms." Daniel arrived breathless, a rare sight. "This is premature," he said, voice pitched for reason. "We can resolve this internally." "You tried," Marcus said. "You stabilized," I added, and watched the word land. Daniel's eyes flicked to the still, then away. "Stills are misleading," he said. "Read the time," Marcus replied. "Read it out loud." Daniel didn't. He leaned on the counter, lowering his voice. "You're forcing a narrative," he said. "I'm submitting evidence," I replied. "Narratives are your department." The officer cleared her throat. "We'll be in touch," she said, and slid the packet into a tray marked Review. Outside, the sun bounced off the building's glass, bright enough to flatten everything. Daniel caught up to me by the revolving door, careful to stay out of the camera's center. "You don't have to do this," he said. "You can stop." "I can't," I replied. "It's already logged." "People forget," he said. "Systems remember," I replied. He scoffed. "You think 3 minutes matters?" "It matters when it moves a body," I said. "And when it moves a file." He smiled, a tight thing. "You'll regret this," he said. "Regret doesn't change timestamps," I replied, and stepped through the door. Back in Marcus's office, we waited. The phone rang once, then again. An oversight analyst asked for confirmation of the corridor location and the camera ID. Tara provided it voice steady, adding the seat identifier from the witness statement, A12, like a final nail. "They're aligning," Marcus said when the call ended. "They're cornered," I replied. The clock ticked, An email arrived with a subject line that didn't pretend neutrality this time. Discrepancy noted. Marcus exhaled. "That's the preface," he said, to what I asked. "To the unavoidable," he replied. Daniel texted a single sentence. "You've crossed a line." I didn't answer. I picked up the still and studied it again, the way the latch caught the light, the crease in the paper, the exactness of the time. It wasn't dramatic, it was precise. When the corridor image proves he arrived before the story, the choice becomes irreversible. We sat in silence, letting the system do what it does when fed something it can't digest quietly. Outside, traffic moved ordinary and loud, unaware of the small hinge turning inside a white office. Marcus finally stood. "Part 10 will be public," he said. "Are you ready?" I looked at the still one last time and slid it back into the packet. I seal the image and send it forward because 3 minutes finally collapse his alibi. The auditorium had been booked under a neutral title that promised updates and transparency, the kind of phrasing institutions favor when they expect applause. And we arrived early because arriving early keeps the stage honest. My immediate goal was exposure without spectacle, to let the proof speak before anyone could redirect it, and the glass podium stood at center stage, pristine and unforgiving, its surface catching every light and reflection. Rows of seats filled with a careful mix of staff, donors, press, and people who understood how rooms decide outcomes, and the hum of conversation flattened as microphones were tested, and the house lights adjusted into a bright band that left the edges in shadow. Tara moved with purpose, checking angles and sightlines, logging camera IDs, and confirming the recording vector with a nod. Marcus stood near the aisle, a slim folder tucked under his arm, the verified case file packet heavy with order and inevitability. Daniel arrived last, as if habit alone could still grant him entrance suit, perfect expression, composed a smile that assumed compliance. He paused when he saw the podium. "This isn't necessary," he said to no one in particular. "It's scheduled," Tara replied, neutral tapping her clipboard. "We're live." The moderator called the room to order, voice practiced, and outlined the agenda in careful terms. When my name was announced, a ripple moved through the seats, curiosity sharpening into attention. I stepped to the glass podium and placed my hands lightly on its edge, feeling the cool resistance beneath my palms, the way glass refuses to absorb anything it's given. The house lights settled. "This session concerns procedural integrity," the moderator said, and yielded the microphone. I didn't look at Daniel when I began. I looked at the audience, at the cameras, at the line of sight that made denial expensive. "We're here because timelines matter," I said evenly past tense, anchoring the room, and because systems require proof before they permit correction. Marcus approached and set the verified case file packet on the podium beside my hands, the paper squared tabs, visible the seal, intact. The packet was thick with intention. A table of contents, stamped pages, cross-referenced exhibits, each marked with ref codes and locations that matched what the room already knew. I opened to the first tab and waited, letting the rustle of paper cue attention. "Exhibit A," I said, and the screen behind me displayed a clean scan of the packet's cover verification marks, visible an external auditor's stamp dated and signed. This packet consolidates previously submitted materials and confirms continuity. I turned a page. Exhibit B and the email header appeared, Ref E7K9, routing path highlighted. Exhibit C and the intake log, with the blue badge notation, resolved into clarity. The room leaned forward as if one body. Daniel shifted in his seat, then stilled hands clasped too tightly. I didn't rush. I moved through the packet with deliberate pace, letting each piece sit long enough to be understood without commentary. Exhibit D. The audio waveform froze on screen. Continuity lines unbroken. Exhibit E. The witness statement with seat identifier A12. Exhibit F. The internal memo screenshot, RF M4L2 administration. Murmurs threaded the air cut by the soft whir of cameras. When I reached the final tab, the one that closed the loop, I paused. The glass podium reflected the room back at itself, faces, doubled lights, sharp. Exhibit G, I said, and the time-stamped CCTV still filled the screen service entrance. Clear green exit sign, unmistakable. 4:09 p.m., printed cleanly in the corner. I let the silence stretch until it pressed back. And Exhibit H. I continued the verification summary, confirming camera sync and metadata integrity. The moderator glanced at Tara, who nodded once. Daniel rose halfway from his seat. "This is a mischaracterization," he said, voice amplified before he could temper it. "Stills can—" "Please," the moderator said, raising a hand. "You'll have an opportunity." Daniel sat jaw tight. When the packet opens on the glass podium and the stamps align, the room understands there is no alternative story. I closed the packet and placed my hands flat again. "The conclusion is narrow," I said. 3 minutes separate these exhibits. 3 minutes that place a person in a corridor before a file could lawfully move. 3 minutes that require prearranged access. A low murmur rolled, not outrage, but recognition. I didn't name intent. I didn't need to. "The system can now decide," I said, and stepped back from the podium. Marcus approached, addressing the room in measured language about process and next steps about how reviews function when facts converge. The moderator thanked him and invited responses. Daniel stood smoothing his jacket and walked toward the aisle, microphone posture controlled. "We all want integrity," he began, the words polished. "But process requires—" The door at the back of the auditorium opened, not loudly, just enough to interrupt cadence, and a figure entered with a badge that caught the light as he moved down the aisle. Agent Lewis didn't hurry. He didn't look at the stage until he reached the front row. Then he did eyes assessing without expression. The room shifted again, attention reassigning itself. The moderator faltered, then recovered. "Sir," she said. "Agent Lewis," he replied, holding up his badge, just long enough for cameras to catch the glint. "Internal Affairs. Court Oversight." Daniel's words thinned to air. Agent Lewis turned to the podium. "We've received the verified packet," he said, voice steady. "We're opening a formal inquiry effective now." The phrase "effective now" settled like dust. "We'll be requesting custody of the originals," he continued. Marcus nodded and handed over the packet without ceremony. Agent Lewis accepted it, checked the seal, and nodded once more. "Mr. Carter," he said, turning to Daniel, "we'll need you to remain available." Daniel smiled reflexively, then realized it didn't fit. "Of course," he said. "This is unnecessary." "It's standard," Agent Lewis replied, and the words sounded final. The moderator ended the session quickly, thanking attendees for their patience. Conversations broke into careful clusters, phones already aloft, messages moving faster than bodies. Tara logged times and exits, clipboard moving in practice strokes. I stood to the side, hands clasped, letting the system claim what it needed. Daniel approached me, stopping just outside the camera's direct line. "You've done enough," he said low. "You've ruined me." "I submitted a packet," I replied. The system responded. His eyes searched my face for something to grab. "This won't end how you think," he said. "It ends how it's documented," I replied. Agent Lewis returned, briefcase in hand. "We'll follow up," he said to me, professional. "Thank you for your cooperation." The word cooperation sounded different now, heavier and cleaner. As the room emptied, I watched the glass podium lose its reflections, lights dimming the stage, reverting to furniture. The packet was gone, but its shape remained in the air, an absence that proved presence. Outside, reporters gathered, questions sharpening. I didn't answer them. I didn't need to. The doors opened and closed, access granted, and denied with new logic. When authority accepts the packet and the badge glints under lights, the doorway stops negotiating. I stepped away from the stage, the hum fading behind me, and felt the calm that arrives when a system finally speaks in its own voice, leaving no space for echoes. Self-eval v2.4, evidence number 8 placed publicly, object used correctly, authority entry post-proof, spikes met, tone controlled. The collapse did not sound like anything dramatic. It sounded like printers waking up, phones ringing once, and stopping doors opening and closing with new rules attached to them. My immediate goal shifted from exposure to endurance to let the consequences finish arriving without interference, and the hard copy notice letter waited on my kitchen table, its envelope heavier than paper had any right to be. It arrived by courier that afternoon. Signature required the delivery person, careful in the way people are when they sense they're carrying a hinge. The return address was institutional, stripped of personality, and when I broke the seal, the letter inside announced its purpose, without flourish. Notice of administrative action. Daniel's name appeared 3 times mine once, both spelled correctly, which felt like a victory after so long being misfiled. The letter outlined interim measures, first a list of constraints written in neutral language that disguised impact as procedure. Access suspended, duties reassigned, materials secured. The words did their quiet work. There was no gavel, no shouting, no apology. There was a timetable and a contact person. I set the letter down and straightened its edges, the habit returning when control mattered. Outside, the city moved as if nothing had happened. Inside, the system began to reconfigure itself around the absence of one man's authority. Daniel called once. I didn't answer. He emailed twice. I read neither until evening when distance made the words smaller. The first message asked for discretion. The second accused me of vindictiveness. I printed both and placed them under the notice letter paper, acknowledging paper a record of tone as much as content. Marcus texted a single line, measures in place. Hold steady. I did. Holding steady became a skill I'd learned in increments in rooms where silence had weight. By the next morning, news had reached the parts of the institution that pretend they don't read news. A receptionist at the firm avoided my eyes when I walked past, then overcorrected with a nod that tried to be respectful. An assistant asked if she could reschedule for clarity. A supervisor sent a calendar invite labeled Process Alignment. The language shifted, and with it the power. The notice letter stayed in my bag, a talisman I didn't need to show. The system had already seen it. Marcus and I met briefly to confirm what would not happen next. No new evidence, he said. No commentary. No celebration, I added. He smiled once. Exactly. He handed me a copy of the letter with a receipt stamp and tucked his own into a file already thick with order. They'll try to slow it, he said. They always do. Time works differently now, I replied. He nodded. It does when authority shifts. Daniel tried to reclaim ground socially before the institution finished its work. A mutual acquaintance invited me to coffee to check in. I declined. Another sent a long message about forgiveness. I archived it. A third warned me about reputational fallout. I forwarded it to Marcus without comment. Each attempt felt like a tug on a door that no longer opened for him. When the notice letter names constraints and people start choosing words, I know the collapse is underway. The formal meeting happened a week later, in a room with too many chairs and a clock that ticked loudly on purpose. Daniel arrived with counsel. I arrived with Marcus and the letter. Agent Lewis did not attend. His absence signaled that this was no longer preliminary. The chair of the review committee read from a prepared statement, voice steady outlining findings in the passive voice institutions favor when they want facts without drama. Procedural deviations occurred, she said. Authority was exceeded. She did not look at Daniel when she said his name. She did not need to. When it was my turn to speak, I declined. My submission stands, I said. The room accepted that. Daniel spoke last words, careful regret implied, but never owned. The committee thanked him and adjourned. The outcome would be issued in writing. The letter on my table would soon have companions. Outside the building, Daniel caught up to me. There were no cameras here, only afternoon light and the sound of traffic. You could have stopped, he said, at any point. So could you? I replied. He shook his head. You wanted this, he said. I wanted accuracy, I replied. You wanted erasure, he said. I wanted alignment, I replied. The words sat between us heavy and final. He laughed once, then stopped. What happens to me now? He asked. I considered him the man who had once decided doors for me. The system decides, I said. I don't. That answer seemed to hurt more than any accusation. The days that followed were quieter. The firm updated its website without explanation. A press outlet ran a careful piece about governance. Comments were disabled. Daniel's profile disappeared from the leadership page, then reappeared under an interim heading, then vanished entirely. The mistress Natalie sent me a message I didn't expect. It was short. I didn't know it read, "I believe you now." I replied once, "The record matters." She didn't respond. I hoped she found a door that opened without permission. At home, I sorted papers I'd been afraid to touch. I threw away nothing. I labeled folders. I placed the notice letter in a box marked resolution, a word that felt aspirational but accurate. Sleep came easier, not because justice is comforting, but because uncertainty had narrowed. I walked in the mornings again, choosing routes that crossed open spaces, noticing how thresholds feel when you don't have to calculate them. The door latch at my apartment clicked with a sound I'd learned to love, decisive, unambiguous. Marcus called with the final administrative outcome before the letter arrived. "Removal," he said simply, and referral. "Thank you," I said. For what he asked. "For precision," I replied. He laughed softly. "You did the hard part," he said. "You held." The letter came that afternoon, thicker than the first, its language firmer. I read it once more, then set it beside the original notice. The two documents faced each other like bookends holding a chapter closed. That evening, Daniel sent one last message. It was not an apology, it was an explanation. I deleted it without opening. When the hard copy letter replaces his name with procedure, the payoff completes itself. I poured a glass of water and stood at the window, watching lights turn on across the city, ordinary and enduring. The collapse had finished arriving. What remained was aftermath and the quiet competence of systems doing what they were always supposed to do once fed the truth. Self-eval V2. 4. Payoff executed without new evidence. Object present and central. Spike number 4 delivered. Tone controlled. Motif resolving trajectory intact. I stand in the present tense again, in a place that used to feel provisional and now feels owned, and my immediate goal is simple: leave nothing unfinished. Morning light slips through the entryway and rests on the floor in a clean rectangle, a doorway half-light that no longer hesitates. And when I step across it, the latch answers with a decisive click that sounds like agreement rather than permission. I clip my badge to my coat out of habit, then stop considering the reflex and unclip it again, letting it catch the light once before I slide it into my pocket. The badge glint is brief and honest. It doesn't ask to be seen, it simply is. Outside, the air is cold enough to sharpen thought, and the city hums with the ordinary competence of people going where they're allowed to go. The aftermath has settled into a rhythm that doesn't require vigilance. Emails arrive with subject lines that name outcomes plainly. Calendars update themselves without my intervention. When I walk into buildings now, no one steers me away from corridors or pretends not to recognize me. Access is procedural and unremarkable, the way it should have been all along. I keep copies of the letters in a thin folder, not because I need them, but because order deserves a home. The folder lives on a shelf by the door, within reach, like a map you don't have to consult anymore. I notice how often I pause at thresholds out of old habit, how the body remembers calculations the mind has retired, and how each pause ends with the same result: the door opens fully. I return to the release gate, once not for closure, but for calibration. The cameras are gone. The guards are different. The concrete smells the same. I stand just outside the line and look back through the fence at the place where everything used to narrow. The gate opens for someone else and closes again, soft, efficient. No one claps. No one performs relief. It is exactly as dramatic as it needs to be, not at all. I breathe and feel my shoulders drop a fraction I didn't know they were holding. The doorway stays open when no one needs to perform forgiveness. Friends ask how it feels, expecting adjectives I don't have. I tell them it feels accurate. Accuracy is a quiet pleasure. It doesn't warm you, but it steadies you. When I sit in meetings now, I listen without scanning for exits. When I speak, I don't watch faces for permission. The system has learned my name and uses it correctly. That alone is enough to change a life. I notice the difference in how time moves. It no longer stalls in hallways or accelerates in rooms with closed doors. It moves like time is supposed to move forward, indifferent fare. Daniel's absence becomes a fact like weather mentioned without heat. His office is reassigned, his parking access revoked, his projects redistributed with careful notes about continuity. People who once deferred to him now defer to policy. I do not track him. I don't need to. The erasure he feared arrives not as spectacle, but as logistics, the clean kind that leaves no residue. Natalie never writes again. I hope she found a version of the truth that didn't require my attention. I don't wish her well or ill. I wish her unremarkable doors. Marcus checks in once more, brief and precise. Everything aligned, he says. Anything outstanding, I ask. No, he replies. You're clear. Clear is a word I savor. I hang up and stand by the window, watching people cross the street on a signal that doesn't change its mind. I think about the years I lost and refuse to inventory them. Loss doesn't need an audit. What needs care is the future, and the future looks like paperwork done right and doors that don't negotiate. I attend a small public forum weeks later, invited to speak about process. The microphone hums familiar and harmless. I say what needs saying and nothing more. Systems work when they accept evidence, I tell the room. They fail when they substitute loyalty for timing. Heads nod. Pens move. The session ends on schedule. I don't linger. I don't need to. Outside, a reporter asks for a quote. I decline politely. The story has already been told, and it doesn't belong to me anymore. It belongs to the record. At home, I set the folder back on the shelf and straighten it once, aligning edges until they agree. The badge rests in a small tray by the door, now no longer clipped, no longer swinging. Sometimes the light catches it when I pass and throws a quick glint across the wall. It startles me every time, a reminder that symbols lose their power when they stop controlling access. I leave it there on purpose. Objects behave better when you let them be what they are. I walk again at dawn, choosing routes with long sight lines and open corners, noticing how the city invites movement when you aren't calculating escape. A neighbor nods. A dog pulls its owner forward. A cafe opens its door and lets warmth spill onto the sidewalk. I step through without thinking. The body learns quickly when it's allowed to. I carry no badge through the doorway, and the doorway doesn't ask me to. The last administrative email arrives mid-morning, a confirmation of closure written in language that sounds like the end of a chapter. I read it once and archive it, not because I want to forget, but because remembering doesn't require keeping everything on the desk. I close the laptop and sit in the quiet that follows work well done. The quiet isn't empty. It's full of things that can finally begin. In the afternoon, I donate the clothes I wore to court, and meetings the uniforms of endurance. I keep one jacket not out of sentiment, but as proof that objects can change roles. In the evening, I cook something simple and eat without distraction, noticing the way hunger and satisfaction can be honest when nothing is being monitored. I wash the dishes and leave them to dry, trusting they will be there when I return. Trust is an ordinary miracle. Before bed, I check the lock once and stop myself from checking it twice. The latch answers. The room settles. I turn off the light and let the dark be dark. The day has closed its doors and opened tomorrow's without asking for my signature. That is the resolution I wanted, the one that doesn't perform, the one that persists. I think back to the gate and the cameras and the practiced smile, and the memory feels like a photograph fading at the edges. What remains sharp is the present. The door that opens the floor that doesn't tilt, the badge that glints only when it wants to. The system spoke, and then it went quiet, which is how you know it worked. I step forward without looking back because the doorway stays open. Mini hook. The door opens, stays open, and nothing asks me to earn it. Self-eval, V2.4. Present tense maintained. Motif resolve delivered. Object used once. 2 highlights placed. Closure achieved. Tone restrained.